In this video, we're going to talk about a 2-1 temporary rate buy down, compare it to what a traditional rate buy down would be, talk about the pros and cons of both of those, and then at the end, I'll go over and I'll show you how you can decide if this is right for you. Let's start with what is a temporary rate buy down. Number one, it's temporary. It's in the name. This is kind of like the popular kid in high school of loans, right? Everybody likes this loan right now. Everybody wants to be around this loan. Everybody's talking about it. But it doesn't mean that it's great for everybody. So let's go over exactly what it is. I'll explain it to you. Number one, with a temporary rate buy down, there's an upfront fee that you pay when you close the loan. This is going to represent partial interest for 1 to 3 years of the loan. In other words, at the closing, you'll prepay the interest for 1 to 3 years. You're not saving money, you're not saving interest, you're just paying it early. The second thing that's important to know, the rate on these loans stays the same, but the payment during the buy down period will feel like it's less because you've prepaid interest. Next, these are potentially refundable during the buy down term. So that upfront fee you pay, you may be able to get some of it back if you refinance or sell. Whatever you haven't used, you'll get back. Again, you're just prepaying the interest here. So it's not that you're necessarily reducing the rate, you're just paying it in advance of when it's due so that when it comes time for the monthly payment, it feels like it's less. And then lastly, these loans will oftentimes have a higher interest rate to start than a more typical loan structure. So in other words, a 30-year fixed rate loan might be a little bit better to start with than a loan that has a 2-1 buy down associated with it. Let me give you some examples. A 2-1 buy down, you prepay the interest for the first 2 years of the loan. So you prepay 2% on year one, 1% on year two, and then after that, your payment goes back to the regular rate. Let's say that you have a note rate or a loan of 6%. Year one, you would pay the interest as if it was 4%. Year two, you'd pay it as if it was 5% because you've already paid that other interest in advance. At the end of year two, your payment goes back to whatever the typical or the note rate would be. So there's no more buy down. You used it. 3-2-1 buy down. This is something different. So just like it sounds, year one, you're paying the interest by 3%, then 2, then 1. So back to our example, if you had a note rate of 6%, then during the first year of the buy down on a 3-2-1 buy down, your 6% note rate, you would pay it as if it was 3%. So you've got a really great payment on the first year. The next year you'd pay it as if it was 4%. The next year your interest rate is going to be like 5%. That's what it's going to feel like out of your budget. And then after that third year or fourth year now, you go on to the 6% rate, which is where it will stay. So the rate always stays the same. The payment just is a little less because you've prepaid the interest for 2 to 3 years. One last thing on this. Let's talk about the 1-1 buy down. It's just what it sounds like. You're prepaying the interest for 1 year by 1%. So 6% rate, it's going to feel like it's 5%. Again, not saving money, you're just paying it in advance. Now let's talk about a traditional buy down. You'd hear these called a loan discount or maybe paying points. You're going to pay some fees up front, and because you've paid a little bit more up front in closing costs, it's reduced the rate for the entire time you have that loan. So rather than being a temporary buy down, this is permanent. You pay up front, again, same thing. There's a one-time fee. This can be paid for by you as the buyer, or it can be paid for by the seller, but it's not refundable. Once you pay that fee and close, your rate stays the same forever as long as you have the loan. But if you refinance early, you don't get any of it back. The interest rate and the payment on this, they stay the same for as long as you have the loan. So there's no variability on your principal and interest payment. So to recap, a traditional rate buy down, the rate and the payment stay the same for the entire time you have the loan. You had a one-time upfront fee, it's not refundable. It reduces your rate for as long as you've got the loan. Let's talk pros and cons and do a little comparison of these two different ideas now that you know what they are. So let's look at this. The pros of a 2-1 buy down. Your fee can be paid for by the seller. That's cool. The seller might pay some extra money up front. We're going to get into what that fee is in a minute. It's expensive, but right now some sellers are willing to pay it. This gives you the lowest possible payment for the first 1 or 2 years. This is going to be your best monthly payment. Next, you can refinance during that period of time that you have the buy down, and you might get some of the buy down cost back. So if you start with a loan and then interest rates improve a lot the next 6 months or 12 months, well, you could refinance and get whatever you haven't used of that buy down would be applied back towards your loan balance. So the money gets used for you one way or the other. And then lastly, this can be a really good loan for people who need a low payment for the first 1 or 2 years. But keep in mind, after that buy down period, so on a 2-1 buy down, that's 2 years. On a 3-2-1 buy down, that's 3 years. If you don't refinance before the end of that rate period, your payment is going to step up every year. So if you get into a loan like this, Just know the payment's going to be the lowest for 1 to 2 years. Compare that to traditional permanent buy down or a loan discount. In this case, again, the fees can be paid for by the seller. That's cool. You're going to save money after a 3-year period on this as compared to these other buy down options. So net everything, I'll show you the math. This will save you more money over 3 years as compared to a 2-1 buy down. But the monthly payment for the first 2 years is going to be a little higher than this 2-1 buy down option. Another great thing, you've got a consistent payment like we talked about. You're not going to have to worry about the payment changing. If rates get better, refinance. If they don't, you've got a fixed rate. You can keep that for 30 years or 15 years, depending on how you set the loan up. This is less expensive by quite a bit as compared to a 2-1 buy down. A permanent buy down, typically you're going to spend 1% of the loan amount. That's not so bad when you compare it to the rate buy down here, which might be 2.5 times that. And on this one, you don't have to refinance again. Just mention that the rate's going to stay the same. If you are okay with that rate, it just stays there. If rates go up, it doesn't matter. If rates come down, refinance. But you don't have to touch the loan. You've got a fixed rate. It's going to stay there for the duration of the loan. All right, let's talk about the downsides of these two programs in comparison. So 2-1 buy down downside, much larger upfront cost. This on a 2-1 buy down will cost about 2.5 times a 1-point buy down. So it's much more expensive upfront. These are really marketable. I guess that's not necessarily bad, right? But they're kind of a trendy loan right now. And really the problem is the way they're being marketed. Most of the marketing you'll hear with these types of programs focus on the first year or the second year payment. They focus on the payment for those first 2 years, and they don't get into what comes next. So if you are looking at these, remember, marketers love these. You might not be able to refinance in 2 or 3 years. One of the pitches I hear a lot is, oh, get a 2-1 buy down. The payment's going to be lower for the first couple of years. You'll just refinance within 2 years anyway. Maybe. But if rates go up, if inflation goes up, if things happen that cause interest rates to really increase, refinancing won't be a good idea. So you can't go into these loans with the out plan being, well, I'm going to refinance. You might. It might not make sense. Just be aware that's not a great strategy. This payment is temporary and it's over after 2 to 3 years, depending on how you structure that. If your budget will only allow for that lower monthly payment that you started with, this could be a disaster. Because by the end of the second or third year, depending again, a 2-1 or a 3-2-1 buy down, your payment is going to go up to whatever that note rate is, and it is going to be substantially more expensive. So you got to be careful and budget, not for today, but make sure you've got a plan for tomorrow. After 3 years, a 2-1 buy down is more expensive than a permanent buy down by 1%. The payment's a little lower for the first 2 years again, but the cost is higher. Downside of a traditional rate buy down, this isn't going to be as interesting to a buyer if you're selling a home. So one strategy that you can use these if you're getting ready to sell a home is you can offer to pay for a buyer's 2-1 buy down, and it makes that payment very attractive. So just paying some closing costs and buying the rate down, it's not as interesting. It may not be as exciting for someone who's trying to get a low payment, but that's the downside. This payment will be higher for the first 2 years as compared to a 2-1 or a 3-2-1 buy down. You're going to have a higher payment when you start, but then it's going to change. The upfront buy down cost, non-refundable. So when you get a permanent buy down, you've paid the fees when you close, that's it. That money's gone, you've used it, you bought the rate down. If you refinance a year later or 6 months later or 10 years later, none of that money refunds back to you. And then lastly, if you refinance within less than 4 years on a permanent buy down, you probably won't break even for the cost that you spent. You're paying money up front, you're reducing the payment over time. You got to save enough money every month to pay yourself back what you spent initially. Well, it takes about 4 years to do that on this type of a program. Let's compare a traditional loan with a 2-1 buy down, because that's the most common types of these temporary buy downs that you're going to see right now. Here's your traditional loan. Here's a buy down. Now, these numbers aren't specific for any scenario. They're indicative of where rates were a few days ago. And I went and looked at this for a $500,000 purchase price, putting 5% down for a borrower with pretty good credit. This is what it would look like at that point. So the permanent buy down, you pay 1%, so about $4,900 up front, or $4,700. I got it right here. Your rate would be 5.625%. Your payment stays the same every year. So your payment stays the same. The only reason your payment would change is if taxes or insurance went up, but that would be true on any loan. This cost, $4,702 is your buy down cost. 2-1 buy down, same day. Now you're starting at a rate of 6.125%. So on year one, you pay $2,303 a month. Look, you saved all this money, $404. You saved $400 a month. That's a ton of money. It makes it much more affordable. But then look at year two. The payment goes up. Now your payment's only $121 less than this payment right here. Year 3, your payment is actually more by $179 than this payment would have been right here. So your payment is down, starts to go up, and then it exceeds what it would have been to have done a permanent buy down after the second year. The costs on this 2-1 buy down, $10,606. So compare those two. The buy down costs $5,904 more to do a 2-1 buy down than it would to do a 1% rate buy down. So you've got to make up $5,904 in cost with the monthly savings. But look at this. The payment savings over 4 years is only $4,164. So you actually save less net everything at the end of 3 years on a 2-1 buy down than you would on a permanent buy down. Let's recap how these look at the end of 3 years for a traditional loan versus a 2-1 buy down. So here's your traditional loan with a 1% rate buy down. So you've paid 1% of the loan balance upfront when you closed. On that last slide you saw it cost about $4,702 versus the 2-1 buy down that cost a little over $10,000 to get that lower payment for the first 2 years. So at the end of 3 years, you owe $450,586 for the permanent buy down. Same loan, 2-1 buy down, you saved $4,100 for those first 3 years, net everything. You're $4,100 less in cash flow to get this loan paid each month. However, at the end of 3 years, you actually owe $6,000 more. So even though you saved money on a monthly basis, you owe more money just 3 years down the road. And then that difference starts to widen over more time. Let's talk about situations where a 2-1 buy down could be a great idea. If you're buying a home and your monthly payment right now is really crucial, you need to have the lowest possible payment today, and you expect that your income is going to go up over the next 2 years. Maybe you're finishing school. Maybe you just started a new career that has a really great opportunity for increased income. Maybe you're in sales and you started a new job and you're really good at what you do and you're expecting realistically that your income is going to go up with commission over the next 3 years. Those kind of things can be a great idea because you get a much lower payment today, and then you're going to have the money 2 years down the road to afford the higher monthly payment if you can't refinance. The downside again though, much more expensive. You've got to come up with about $6,000 more to do a 2-1 buy down than a 1% buy down on a $500,000 purchase. Now you know how these work. You can look at the numbers and find out which one of these is right for you. If you'd like more information about your specific situation, feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to give you details on what you can do with either of these or one of the other many loan options that are available.